December 1944. Adolf Hitler's last great gamble, the Ardennes offensive, had just smashed through American lines. Thousands of American soldiers were surrounded at Bastogne. German panzers were driving toward Antwerp. Hitler believed victory was finally within reach. Then the phone rang at Supreme Headquarters. It was General George S. Patton. "We can be there in 48 hours, he said calmly. Eisenhower's staff thought he was insane. Moving 3 entire divisions 90 degrees north through winter ice and snow in just 2 days? Impossible. Hitler's staff officers had specifically planned for Patton's Third Army to be too far south to interfere. They calculated it would take at least 2 weeks for him to respond. But Patton had already started moving. Within 72 hours, his Third Army smashed into the German flank, relieving Bastogne and turning Hitler's offensive into a catastrophic defeat. The German leader was stunned. This wasn't just battlefield genius. It was something Hitler and his generals never expected from an American commander. When German intelligence first encountered Patton in Tunisia in 1943, their reports barely noticed him. Hitler's military leadership had spent years perfecting armored warfare on the Eastern Front and in North Africa. They assumed American generals, with their preference for overwhelming firepower and cautious tactics, would be easy to predict and easier to defeat. Hitler himself believed Americans were soft, undisciplined, and incapable of the kind of aggressive warfare his Wehrmacht had perfected. That racist assumption would prove catastrophically wrong. The first surprise came in how Patton studied his enemy. While other Allied commanders focused on their own plans, Patton devoured translated German military literature. He read the writings of German generals, understanding their tactical thinking better than most of his peers. Hitler's commanders prided themselves on superior military education and Prussian tradition. Yet here was an American general who had mastered their own doctrine and was preparing to use it against them. When Hitler received reports that an American commander was employing German-style mission tactics, he reportedly dismissed it as impossible. The second unexpected move was Patton's use of combined arms coordination that rivaled anything the Wehrmacht could produce. His Third Army headquarters employed more intelligence officers specifically designated to coordinate airstrikes than any other Allied formation. He pioneered the technique of armored column cover, where close air support was directed by an air traffic controller riding in one of the attacking tanks. Hitler had built the Luftwaffe to support his ground forces, but chronic fuel shortages and Allied air superiority had crippled German air power by 1944. Watching Patton's forces operate with seamless air-ground integration must have reminded Hitler of what his own military had once been capable of. Third, Patton shocked Hitler's command by emphasizing speed over caution in ways that even German blitzkrieg doctrine hadn't fully embraced. His Third Army covered 60 miles in just 2 weeks during the advance from Avranches to Argentan. Light reconnaissance aircraft that normally served as artillery spotters were pressed into intelligence roles because his forces moved too fast for traditional reconnaissance. Hitler had invented lightning war, but Patton perfected it with American resources and relentless aggression. German staff officers reported to Hitler that they couldn't keep track of Patton's movements. By the time intelligence confirmed his position, he'd already moved. The fourth surprise was his intelligence operation that seemed almost supernatural. Patton's G2 intelligence officer, Colonel Oscar Koch, briefed him daily with ultra-intelligence intercepts. Before the Battle of the Bulge, Koch warned that Germans were massing for a major offensive when most Allied commanders dismissed the possibility. Hitler had personally ordered complete radio silence and deception measures for the Ardennes attack, believing it would achieve total surprise. Instead, Patton was already preparing contingency plans. When Hitler learned that Patton had anticipated the offensive and positioned forces to respond, he reportedly flew into a rage, demanding to know how the Americans had discovered his secret operation. The fifth thing Hitler never expected was Patton's logistical innovation that turned supply problems into offensive weapons. Hitler's own forces were crippled by fuel shortages and severed supply lines, yet somehow this American general kept advancing. Patton's forces seized enemy fuel dumps and ammunition stores, living off captured German resources. His supply echelons moved almost as fast as his combat units, using captured trucks and requisitioned civilian vehicles. Hitler had calculated that Allied logistics would limit their advance. Instead, Patton used his logistics as a competitive advantage. Sixth, Patton employed ammunition expenditure in ways that Hitler, desperately rationing every bullet and shell for his own forces, found incomprehensible. American armor would advance using heavy machine guns to flush out German positions, particularly hidden anti-tank teams. The 50 caliber Browning proved brutally effective at suppressing German infantry. Hitler's forces were operating under severe ammunition shortages, ordered to make every shot count. Meanwhile, Patton's units could afford overwhelming firepower. The contrast between German scarcity and American abundance, wielded by an aggressive commander, was demoralizing for Hitler's troops. The seventh surprise came during the Sicily campaign. Hitler had dispatched German forces to stiffen Italian resistance, expecting a conventional Allied advance. Instead, Patton launched an unauthorized dash up Sicily's western coast, capturing Palermo in a lightning strike that bypassed German defensive positions. Within a week, he had created an entirely new mechanized corps and pushed it over 100 miles. Hitler's staff had planned for methodical Allied advances they could counter. Patton's improvisational speed made their defensive plans obsolete before they could be implemented. Eighth, Patton's role in the D-Day deception operation personally infuriated Hitler. As the fake commander of the 1st United States Army Group, Patton appeared at carefully staged events in southeastern England. Hitler's intelligence services, considering Patton the most dangerous Allied commander, convinced their leader that the main invasion would come at Pas-de-Calais. Hitler personally ordered divisions held back from Normandy, waiting for Patton's real invasion that never came. When Hitler finally realized he'd been deceived, that Patton had been used as bait to manipulate him, his fury was legendary. He had been outsmarted by the very general he most feared. The ninth unexpected capability was Patton's ability to turn Hitler's counterattacks into devastating Allied victories. When German forces launched Operation Ludick in August 1944, Hitler personally ordered the attack, believing it would cut off American advances and restore his Western Front. Instead, Patton recognized the counterattack as an opportunity. He advocated for a massive envelopment that helped turn Hitler's offensive into the Falaise Pocket disaster, 300,000 German casualties that Hitler's forces could never replace. Hitler had ordered his generals to attack, expecting American confusion. Patton gave him annihilation. 10th, Patton's tactical flexibility confused Hitler's commanders, who tried to predict his next move. During the race across France, Patton was ordered to swing west into Brittany. He sent minimal forces to Brittany while maintaining his eastward momentum with the bulk of his army. By the time Hitler's staff understood Patton's real intentions, German forces were already being encircled. Hitler valued obedience and rigid adherence to orders. Patton showed him that flexible thinking defeated rigid planning. The 11th shock was Patton's winter offensive capability. Hitler had launched the Battle of the Bulge in December, calculating that winter weather would ground Allied aircraft and make rapid Allied response impossible. Most commanders, including many Germans, assumed major operations would pause during brutal winter conditions. Hitler specifically chose winter for his offensive based on this assumption. Then Patton achieved what Hitler thought impossible. He maintained offensive operations through ice, snow, and freezing conditions. Patton even had his chaplain compose a prayer for good weather, and when the skies cleared, American aircraft devastated German columns. Hitler's weather calculations had failed against Patton's determination. The 12th unexpected element was Patton's intelligence system that seemed to read Hitler's mind. Traditional military intelligence moved slowly through command channels. Patton attached cavalry reconnaissance units directly to combat divisions, creating an information network that bypassed bureaucracy. When Hitler's staff made decisions at headquarters, Patton often seemed to know about them within hours. Hitler became paranoid about spies and traitors, never realizing that Patton's system was simply more efficient than German intelligence gathering had become. The 13th thing Hitler never anticipated was Patton's psychological impact on German morale. Hitler had built his military on the concept of German superiority and the weakness of democratic armies. Yet German frontline soldiers began to fear facing Patton's units specifically. Captured German officers admitted their troops' morale collapsed when they learned Patton's army was approaching. Hitler's ideology insisted Germans were superior warriors. Patton's reputation proved that wrong. One German commander reported to Hitler that his men were surrendering rather than face Patton's forces, a humiliating admission that contradicted everything Hitler's propaganda claimed. 14th, Patton's crossing of the Rhine River in March 1945 demonstrated audacity that caught Hitler completely off guard. while British forces prepared a massive crossing with thousands of artillery guns. Patton quietly crossed at Oppenheim without preliminary bombardment. Just soldiers and boats rowing silently across in darkness. Hitler had ordered the Rhine defended at all costs, believing it would delay the Allies for months. Instead, Patton was across with only 34 casualties before Hitler even knew the attack had begun. When Hitler received the report, he reportedly refused to believe it at first, insisting his intelligence officers must be mistaken. The 15th and perhaps most devastating surprise was that Patton never fought the way Hitler expected. Hitler's military planning assumed Allied commanders would prioritize cities and geographical objectives. Patton prioritized destroying German combat power. He bypassed heavily fortified cities, letting follow-on forces reduce them while his spearheads raced deeper into Germany. Hitler would order cities held at all costs, then watch in frustration as Patton simply went around them, leaving German garrisons isolated and irrelevant. Every defensive strategy Hitler's staff developed assumed Patton would attack where defenses were strongest. Instead, he attacked where they were weakest, moved where he wasn't expected, and struck before preparations were complete. The cumulative effect of these surprises was catastrophic for Hitler's strategic planning. He had expected to face American generals who fought by the book, methodical, cautious, predictable. Hitler's own generals had warned him that underestimating American capabilities was dangerous, but he ignored them. Instead, he got Patton, who combined German tactical thinking with American resources and his own aggressive creativity. German General Heinz Guderian, father of armored warfare, admitted after the war that Patton acted as Guderian himself would have acted. For Hitler, who had relied on German tactical superiority to compensate for strategic disadvantages, facing a general who could match or exceed his best commanders was a nightmare. Perhaps the greatest irony is that Hitler initially dismissed Patton as just another American commander. Early German intelligence reports described him as systematic and cautious, assessments Hitler accepted because they confirmed his prejudices about American weakness. But as the war progressed and Patton's true capabilities became apparent, Hitler's attitude changed dramatically. By late 1944, Hitler's intelligence briefing specifically tracked Patton's movements. Hitler would demand updates on where Patton was, what he was doing, what he might do next. The General Hitler had once dismissed now occupied significant space in the German leader's strategic thinking. The Battle of Ericourt in September 1944 illustrated why Hitler learned to fear Patton. German panzer brigades, equipped with superior Panther tanks, attacked expecting easy victory. Hitler had been assured that German armor technology would offset American numerical advantages. Instead, American training, reconnaissance, and coordination resulted in devastating German defeat. Patton's forces destroyed scores of German tanks while losing few of their own. When Hitler received the casualty reports, he demanded explanations. How had inferior American tanks defeated superior German Panthers? The answer was that technology meant nothing against superior tactics. What truly frustrated Hitler was that Patton learned and adapted faster than German forces could respond. Each encounter revealed new American tactical innovations. Hitler's military was fighting reactively, responding to Allied moves rather than dictating tempo. Against most Allied commanders, this defensive approach worked reasonably well. Against Patton, it was a recipe for continuous defeat. Hitler held increasingly angry meetings with his generals, demanding they find ways to stop Patton's advance. None of their solutions worked for long. The liberation of France showcased every aspect of Patton's unexpected capabilities. In just over 3 months, his forces advanced from Normandy to the German frontier, over 400 miles. They fought and won dozens of engagements, liberated countless towns, and inflicted irreplaceable losses on German forces. Hitler threw fresh panzer brigades, new divisions, and fortified positions at Patton's advance. Nothing stopped him for long. Hitler's frustration was palpable in his increasingly desperate orders to hold at all costs positions that Patton would bypass or overwhelm within days. When Patton finally paused at the Moselle River in September, it wasn't because Hitler's forces had stopped him. It was because Allied logistics temporarily caught up with his ambition. Hitler's staff briefly celebrated, believing they had finally contained the American general. That celebration ended when Patton resumed his offensive with reinforced power, smashing through German defenses Hitler had believed were impregnable. The ultimate measure of Patton's impact on Hitler's war wasn't just territory conquered or casualties inflicted. It was the fear and frustration he caused in Hitler's headquarters. After the war, German generals who had faced Patton universally acknowledged his skill. They called him the most aggressive Allied commander, comparing him favorably to Germany's best generals. These weren't compliments given lightly. They were acknowledgments that Patton had shown Hitler something he never expected, an American general who could not only match German tactical skill but often exceed it. In the end, what Hitler never expected was that an American general would master armored warfare so completely that he would turn German doctrine against them. Hitler had built his empire on military superiority and the belief that democratic societies couldn't produce warrior leaders. Patton demolished that assumption. The 15 surprises Patton delivered weren't accidents. They were the result of a military mind that refused conventional limitations and constantly sought new ways to outthink and outmaneuver the enemy. Hitler had expected to face soldiers. Instead, he faced Patton, and that made all the difference in destroying the Third Reich.